Welcome to C-Suite Sherpas, where we shine a spotlight on business experts and resources that you should know. I'm your host, Ron Partridge, and today I'm excited to have, for the second time, Ken Demma, who's principal of Customer Dimensions. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, Ron, it's great to be here again.
Customer Dimensions work in the consulting, coaching, advisory space, and they really focus on helping clients earn more from their existing customers. And they do this through using data analytics and marketing practices. And I know, Ken, the first time we talked, it really focused on, I think, more of the outcomes and things like that. And I think today we wanted to really focus on the uniqueness of the data analytics piece, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, the reason why we're customer dimensions is we realize that customers are complicated and it takes a combination of some really good marketing thinking, but it also takes understanding who the customers are, which means a real ability to get around and use data and analytics. And, when we speak to our clients, we have as many clients that just want to talk about analytics as we do those who want to talk about the outcomes, the retention, the loyalty. And we spoke last time about our accelerator around that. So it's good to be back to talk about the analytics side of the equation. As I mentioned, there are plenty of folks that come to us that aren't yet focused on what they want to do with their customers, but they certainly say, hey, can you help us with analytics? Because a lot of the same principles in getting value out of analytics are the same. So we've put together an accelerator for customers like that called Analytics to Insight, which is a program that helps them over an 8-week period begin to really get value out of the data that's sitting in their companies and putting it to use.
Yeah, do you find that defining, the customer attributes or attribution of the customers, do you find that's usually a stumbling block, or are you able to kind of get that through the data that they do have?
Oh, the biggest stumbling block is the culture itself and the ability to get started, right? It's almost as if folks are going on a journey, but they don't even want to get in the car until they made sure everything is packed. And truth of the matter is, with analytics, you have to start using what you have. The data is not perfect today. It's not going to be perfect tomorrow. We could do things to make it better, but you need to get started. You need to be doing things. And, waiting to do analytics, whether it be specifically around the topics we were talking about, loyalty, retention, and customer growth, or just in a more general sense, you want to bring some KPIs into your business. You want to run your business more efficiently. You have to start now. You can't keep putting it off. And that's what we focus on. We focus on getting people off the dime. We acknowledge with them it's hard. There shouldn't be any shame that you haven't done certain things or only gotten so far. This is hard stuff. In big companies, it's hard. It's hard in small companies. It's hard with it's just hard, period, because there are lots of moving parts in terms of data, in terms of systems, in terms of talent. Do you have people that can do this type of work? Very often they come back and say, we don't have the people. Maybe you can help us with that as well. We need to get down the road. We need to start using the data, using analytics, and it builds upon itself. And since we've last spoken, I met with an organization. I won't call it a business because it's not a business, it's a foundation which grants money. And you would think, why do they need analytics? They wisely want to use analytics to understand the impacts they're having. They want to use analytics in terms of prioritizing the grants and things like that. Many of the same principles that we use in thinking about customers and in thinking about analytics for marketing purposes come into play. Again, beginning with acknowledging this is hard. We know that's why you haven't been doing it so far. So let's do this together. I know the name of this podcast is C-Suite Sherpas. Very often I would say to a client, think of us as your Sherpa. Think of us as here to assist you as you go on this journey. We're not, going to come in and do it for you and then leave as a consultant would. We're going to help you get there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because as Brian, one of our founders, always tells us, Sherpas are there to tell you you need that, you don't need that. Don't worry about that. Focus on this. This is what you need to survive the trek up the mountain. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with people like yourself. And When you're talking, one of the things I was thinking about this from an executive's perspective, one of the challenges we always had were data silos, right?
Mhm.
Finance had their data, marketing had their data, customer had their data, operations had their data. How do you bridge that? How do you bring all that together and kind of put it in a way that you can actually parse it and analyze it?
The physical way to do that is, and the good news is there are platforms that could easily bring it together, and AI is actually making that easier. The more conceptual part is you start with questions that are not specifically just finance or just customer or just, say, manufacturing. You try to find areas in the business where analytics are going to bring the biggest value. And often the biggest value is brought not within silos, but as you work across silos. So
Mhm.
I may want to understand, as an example, let's say we are talking about customer retention. I am going to need financial information because I want to understand the value of my customers, not just who they are, which certainly we have the customer information there. We have marketing information in terms of what programs and campaigns we run, but I want finance information. I want to understand what their value is to us so that I could then make decisions about that. I may want to bring in product data, not just what they own, but what version of what they own. In other words, are there upgrade opportunities? Are there chances to move them into new products, things like that? So we should start with the most impactful business questions and then bring in the data from different sources as we need to. Again, physically, that's more possible today than ever to do it, but the stumbling block is the conceptual one. It's the one around how do we think of this? And that helps us bring a lot of it together. For businesses that don't want to be thinking as broadly and just want to say, look, Ken, we just need to get started. And I've been with some of these types of companies, we just want to use our finance data better, or we just want to understand our revenues better. Okay, let's start putting together some KPIs. Let's start understanding what's driving the business. And just naturally going through that process, you will, at a certain natural point, need to bring data together. It's going to need to be more than finance. It will be not just finance, but maybe where my sales teams are arrayed. So I could align to the finance, so I could figure out KPIs in terms of my sales leverage and so on. So you will naturally end up down those roads. For me, the opportunity is to get people started. Take away the roadblock. That's where you want to start. Great. It's an overused expression, but it does have value. Is the idea of you meet people where they are,
Yeah.
right? So, I've actually, over the years with some of the analytics stuff, I mentioned this foundation. It was the first time I've ever dealt with a foundation and thought about it from an analytics point of view. I've worked with construction companies around analytics, not your traditional analytics approach, right? I've come from financial services and tech and areas where they're big analytic users. I've worked with municipalities. How do they want to do data so they can bring more services to their constituencies? So there's application across the board. So it's very important from our perspective as to where and how can we get started with them? How can we get them started on the road? Because here's the thing about analytics. Once you start using it and you start seeing the benefit, you want a whole lot more, right? As I often caution people who are in positions in IT or running an analytics team, they're never going to satiate all the appetite. Never going to happen. In fact, the more they do, the more demand there's going to be.
Yeah. I have lived that, and it becomes almost like an addiction, right? You become addicted to that data, but more importantly, it just makes your job easier as far as decisions and things. So
Exactly.
how do you help leaders and managers look at the data in a way that adds value?
We have to go back to starting with the questions. What is it we're really trying to understand? Oh, we want to enter a new market. That's our big plan for 25. How do we begin doing analytics around what it looks like to enter that market? And we begin taking them in chunks that way, as opposed to, hey, we just want to do all these different analytics and we have people running in every direction trying to build things and create numbers. It's much more effective and efficient that we break it down by the questions. We understand where the areas of opportunity are. So let's say, Ron, you and I were in an energy business.
Mhm.
And for us, a big driving factor is where do we find new energy resources or deposits? How can we use analytics as a key leverage point, right? So by really breaking things down into what's strategically important that aligns to the business, and then what are the questions around that, it allows us to start going into the data in an organized way. Well, we're going to need geology data for that. We're going to need to understand where our different customers are located relative to energy resources and so on and so forth. So you really let the business initiative, the business question, the business strategy drive the analytic strategy.
Yeah.
What I see happen where companies get into trouble, to your point, it's almost an addiction. They very quickly try to do a lot of things that are not connected. We're going to have a whole set of financial analytics. We're going to have marketing analytics, and those two aren't speaking. We're going to have manufacturing analytics over here. The idea is to really build these things up cross-functionally. And that's not to say that in finance there aren't certain things that we should be looking at through a financial lens. There are probably KPIs that are only going to exist in finance, and that's fine. But let's do it in a way that is thoughtful in terms of how we're addressing the business and not just analytics for analytics' sake in more silos.
Right. Yeah, and I think customer dimensions will help companies get more from existing customers. And what's from an executive's perspective, what's great about that is your lowest cost acquisition
Absolutely.
because they're already your customers and upselling them is a lot less expensive than trying to generate new customers. So is that why you're kind of focused on helping them get more from existing clients?
That is the primary business driver why, yes. I would take it a step further, though, in
Okay.
that my personal ethos, the way I grew up, is has been in customer service. I don't mean that as in customer service and call center, in the service of customers. So I grew up with customer centricity and total quality management movement that talked about customer in, blah, blah, blah. So I am very oriented around customer. I worked early on in my career at American Express. Guess what it was about? It was about our card members, right? So my whole mindset and orientation is customer based. So a lot of things I do are in service of that. But yeah, I mean, from a business point of view, who doesn't want to have a lower cost of acquisition and go after this? But what astounds me, Ron, is, and I think we touched on this last time, is you'll speak to someone running a business and they'll say, yeah, I got 10 salespeople. It's like, well, how many are focused on expanding your current customers? And they'll be like, well, one, the other nine are getting us new business. And it's like, wow. So you're paying nine salaries to get new business. We always need new business. But you only have one person farming the fields you've already grown crops on. So for me, there's also a bit of evangelism as we need to do more of this. The good news is there's a good business case around it in terms of not only should you be doing this, but look at how profitable this is. I mean, to
Right.
your point, Ron, it's about profit. Costing me fractions of what acquisition costs to get these people. And oh, by the way, it pays off over time because they'll stay longer. For me, the math just works. From an analytics point of view, and that's where the analytics becomes important, it helps us prove that case over and over. And the analytics can also be used to drive the retention, to drive the customer experience, to show you the profiles of who those customers are, which hopefully make acquiring the new ones cheaper as well.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we're at the end. Did you have any other parting thoughts that you wanted to leave people with?
Yeah, the one thing I typically say when I am brought in and I'm speaking to people about this type of work is they need to get started. And small steps are as good as big steps to get started. They need to be patient, particularly working with data. Patience is important. That doesn't mean delay. That means being patient. That means doing things but learning from it. And that change doesn't happen overnight. This is hard stuff, but that's okay because with the right guide, the right Sherpas along the way, you can get where you want to be.
That's awesome. All right, Ken, just a reminder to people, what's the best way to get a hold of you if they want to collaborate with you?
They can reach me through customerdimensions.com. They could reach me on LinkedIn. They could reach me through C Suite Sherpers and the referral machine. Or they can even reach me through Babson College, where I teach these topics, and particularly analytics and marketing to MBA students. Any way you want to reach me, I am reachable and very interested in talking to you.
All right. Ken, thank you very much. I'm glad you were able to come back and we were able to dive deeper into the analytics piece. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me back, Ron. It's always good spending time with you.
Awesome. All right, Ken, we'll see you later.
Thank you.